Imagine eyes like shards of sky, piercing through the shadows of chains and soil, eyes that shouldn't exist on a man born into bondage. In the heart of Virginia's red earth, they sparked a fire of jealousy so fierce, it consumed everything: love, honor, even life itself. What divine reckoning awaits when bloodlines betray and sins refuse to stay buried? Tonight, we unearth the terror. In the dim haze of dawn, where the Blue Ridge Mountains loomed like silent judges over the rolling fields of Albemarle County, Virginia, a single pair of eyes cut through the mist like forbidden light. Pale blue, unnaturally vivid against skin the color of deep earth, they belonged to a young man named Daniel, enslaved, unyielding, and marked by a curse that whispered of unholy unions. It was the spring of 1851, a time when the air hummed with the promise of harvest, but beneath the soil, roots of resentment twisted deep. Those eyes weren't just a quirk of fate, they were a living testament to sins committed in the dark, sins that the Bible itself condemned as the fruit of forbidden desire. Thou shalt not covet, the scriptures warned, but on the Hartwell Plantation, covetousness had bloomed into something far more lethal, a jealousy that festered like an open wound, drawing flies and infection until it demanded blood. Picture the scene: the sun creeping over the horizon, casting long shadows across 800 acres of tobacco that swayed like a sea of green whispers. The leaves rustled softly, their sticky resin clinging to the air, mingling with the scent of damp clay and distant wood smoke from the slave quarters. Daniel knelt in the dirt, his broad hands plunging into the earth, planting seedlings with a rhythm born of endless repetition. Sweat beaded on his forehead, tracing lines down his neck, soaking into the rough homespun shirt that hung loose on his frame. He was 23, built like the oaks that lined the plantation drive, strong, resilient, yet forever bent by the weight of his existence. But those eyes, oh, those eyes lifted for just a moment, catching the light, and in that instant, they betrayed everything. They spoke of a lineage that crossed the chasm between master and slave, a violation of the natural order that society pretended didn't exist, but God surely noted in his ledger of judgments. The Hartwell Plantation wasn't just land, it was a kingdom unto itself, a microcosm of the Old South's grandeur and its hidden rot. The main house rose at the end of a gravel path, its white brick facade gleaming under the morning sun, columns standing tall like sentinels guarding secrets. Wide verandas wrapped around it, shaded by ancient oaks whose branches dripped with Spanish moss, swaying gently in the breeze. Inside, polished hardwood floors creaked underfoot, echoing through rooms filled with mahogany furniture imported from England, crystal chandeliers that tinkled like distant bells, and portraits of stern ancestors staring down with disapproval. The air inside carried the faint aroma of beeswax polish, mingled with the richer notes of pipe tobacco and lavender sachets tucked into drawers. It was a place of opulence, where silver gleamed on the dining table and silk curtains filtered the harsh sunlight into soft, golden hues. Colonel Edmund Hartwell, the master of this domain, was a man forged in the fires of tradition and war. At 47, his temples streaked with silver, he carried himself with the unyielding posture of a soldier who had charged into battle during the Mexican War, earning his rank not through favor but through blood-soaked fields. His face was a map of lines, deep furrows from squinting against the sun while inspecting crops, crow's feet from forced smiles at county gatherings. His hands, though calloused from occasional labor, were more often gloved, gripping the reins of his prized stallion as he rode the perimeter of his estate. Edmund's voice was deep, resonant, the kind that commanded attention in Richmond's halls or silenced a room at St. Anne's Episcopal Church, where the family pew, third from the front, had borne the weight of Hartwell prayers for generations. His father, the late Colonel Thomas Hartwell, had been the architect of this empire, a delegate in Virginia's House who amassed land through cunning deals and ruthless efficiency. Thomas's death in 1845 had passed not just acres but an invisible mantle: uphold the name, preserve the legacy, at any cost. Edmund felt it like a chain around his neck, heavier than any iron on his slaves. Honor, stability, tradition, these were the pillars of the Hartwell name, etched into the red clay soil like commandments. But beneath them lurked shadows, moral compromises that the good book decried. The wages of sin is death, Romans whispered, and on this plantation, sin had planted seeds long ago. Edmund's wife, Catherine, was the porcelain facade of this world, 37, with skin like alabaster shielded from the sun's judgment, dark hair coiled in elegant twists, and a figure cinched by corsets that spoke of controlled desires. She moved through the house with the grace of a southern belle, her skirts rustling like whispers of silk against polished floors. Her eyes, sharp and hazel, missed nothing: a speck of dust on a mantle, a servant's lingering glance, or the subtle shifts in her husband's demeanor. Married 15 years, she had borne 3 children: Margaret, 13, blooming into beauty with her mother's poise; Ned, 11, already shadowing his father in the stables, learning the reins of power; and Sarah, 7, with curls like sunlight and a laugh that echoed through the halls like innocent bells. To outsiders, the Hartwells were the epitome of antebellum virtue, gracious hosts whose dinner parties featured ham glazed with honey from their own hives, turkey roasted over open flames, and wines from a cellar that rivaled Richmond's finest. Catherine's piano melodies floated through open windows, her soprano voice weaving hymns that praised divine order, even as her heart harbored chaos. But pause here, listener, feel the undercurrent, the spiritual chill that seeped through the cracks. For in the Bible's eyes, this paradise was tainted. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and the Hartwells were no exception. Catherine's impeccable manners hid a soul tormented by betrayal, a wound inflicted before her wedding vows were even spoken. It festered like the thorns in Christ's crown, pricking deeper with each passing year, turning empathy to enmity, love to loathing. Her management of the household was a veneer efficient, yes, but laced with a quiet tyranny that the enslaved felt like a lash unspoken. Behind the main house, hidden from view yet ever present, lay the slave quarters, 12 weathered cabins in neat rows, their wooden walls splintered in gray, roofs patched with whatever scraps could be found. Dirt floors compacted from countless footsteps, fireplaces belching smoke that stung the eyes and clung to clothes. In summer, the heat turned them into ovens, sweat pooling in the cracks; in winter, drafts howled like vengeful spirits, chilling bones to the marrow. Each cabin sheltered families, 2 to 6 souls crammed into one room, sleeping on pallets stuffed with corn husks, the air thick with the smells of sweat, stew, and survival. Yet within this oppression bloomed a resilient community, bound by shared hymns sung low under starlit skies, stories passed like heirlooms, and a faith in deliverance that echoed the Israelites' exodus. "The Lord is my shepherd," they murmured in secret gatherings, finding solace in psalms that promised justice beyond the whip. The enslaved were the unseen engines of Hartwell's wealth, field hands bent double in the tobacco rows, their fingers raw from handling the broadleaves, backs scarred from son and overseer alike. House servants in starched uniforms, moving like ghosts through the big house, anticipating needs with bowed heads. The blacksmith's hammer rang out in rhythmic prayer, the carpenter's saw whispered of creation amid destruction, the cook's pots bubbled with meager rations transformed by skill and spice. Hierarchies existed here too: house slaves with slightly better scraps, field workers with callous solidarity. Marriages. Blessed by the master, children raised in the shadow of sail, elders who remembered the first clearing of the land, their wrinkled faces maps of endurance. And then there was Daniel, the anomaly, the living symbol of transgression. Born in 1828 on a January night when frost etched patterns on cabin windows like divine warnings, he entered the world amid his mother Ruth's labored breaths. The midwife, an elder with hands like weathered bark, had gasped at those newborn eyes, blue as the heavens, stark against his emerging hue. Ruth, 19 then, had cradled him and wept, knowing the mark of Cain it represented. Now 42, Ruth toiled in the kitchen, her once slender frame bent, gray strands weaving through her braids like threads of sorrow. Her hands, chapped from scalding water and endless scrubbing, moved with mechanical grace, chopping onions that brought tears she could blame on the sting, stirring pots over flames that mirrored her inner turmoil. She was the epitome of invisibility, quiet, compliant, a shadow in the big house. But her son, he shone like a beacon she couldn't dim. Daniel's childhood was a lesson in evasion. Taunts from other children, ghost eyes, master's mistake, hushed by fearful parents. White visitors stared, some with prurient curiosity, others with revulsion, as if he were a biblical abomination, a reminder of Lot's daughters or David's folly with Bathsheba. Catherine's gaze was the worst, pure venom, a serpent's stare that coiled dread in his gut. He learned paths through the woods to avoid her, timed his tasks to evade her shadow. At 6, thrust into the fields, he carried water in buckets that blistered his palms, weeded rows until his knees ached. By adolescence, the work hardened him, hauling under relentless sun, harvesting leaves that stuck like accusations. The overseer, Garrett, a gaunt specter with leather skin and sadistic glee, wielded his whip like God's judgment, stripes on Daniel's back a testament to undue wrath. But why the extra lash? Why the pointed punishments? It traced back to 1836, when Catherine arrived as a blushing bride. 22, from Richmond's elite, she stepped from the carriage in white silk, dreams of romance shimmering like dew. The wedding at St. Paul's had been a spectacle: lace veils, champagne toasts, a cake towering like Babel. Yet reality corroded the fairy tale. Isolation gnawed Charlottesville miles away, Richmond a distant memory. The house creaked with neglect, servants resistant to her novice commands. Edmund, attentive in courtship, now distant, buried in ledgers and fields, his touches rare, his attentions elsewhere. 3 weeks in, the revelation struck like lightning. Strolling the yard, she spied Edmund with Ruth, too close, voices too intimate, a touch on the arm that screamed familiarity. That night, queries met deflections, Edmund's evasion a confession. Months later, Daniel's birth, Catherine, compelled, visited the cabin. Holding the infant, whispering for his eyes to open, and there they were, Hartwell blue, a mirror to her husband's lineage. The world shattered. Betrayal, premarital yet piercing, a sin against vows unspoken. Adultery in the heart, Jesus preached, but here it was flesh and blood. She couldn't rage, society forbade it. Southern ladies buried such humiliations, lest they tarnish the family silver. Instead, wrath turned inward, then outward to the vulnerable. Ruth endured harder labors, scant rations, threadbare cloth. Daniel, as he grew, became the focal point, Catherine's field visits, parasol shading her fury, directives to Garrett ensuring that boy felt the sting. It was divine retribution in her mind, punishing the fruit of sin, as God smote the firstborn in Egypt. Yet this brewed a storm, psychological torment twisting her soul, guilt mingling with jealousy like oil and water. Edmund knew, of course. His blue eyes in Daniel's face were undeniable, a paternal echo he ignored publicly but perhaps pondered in private prayers. Had he sought forgiveness in church, kneeling on that worn pew? Or did pride blind him, as it did Pharaoh? The plantation pulsed with this unspoken truth, a spiritual haunting where justice loomed. Slaves whispered of signs, strange lights in the quarters, dreams of reckoning. Daniel, resilient, found solace in stolen moments reading smuggled Bible verses by moonlight, verses like "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord," fueling a quiet hope. As spring 1851 unfolded, tensions simmered like a pot near boil. Tobacco buds promised bounty, but omens abounded, a crow circling the big house, unusual storms rattling windows like angry spirits. Catherine's hatred peaked, her reflections in mirrors showing a woman eroded by resentment, pale cheeks hollowed, eyes shadowed by sleepless nights haunted by visions of blue-eyed phantoms. Edmund, sensing the fracture, buried himself deeper in work, his rides longer, his silences heavier. Daniel, unaware of the precipice, toiled on, his eyes downcast but spirit unbroken. Before we delve deeper into the explosion that shattered this fragile piece, if these tales of historical shadows and moral reckonings grip your soul, subscribe now, hit that bell to join our community of seekers uncovering the past's chilling truths. Share in the comments, from which corner of this vast land do you hail? Your voices weave our narrative richer. Now, imagine the weight of legacy, 3 generations of Hartwells, their sins compounding like interest on a debt to divinity. Thomas Hartwell, the patriarch, had cleared this land with enslaved hands, building wealth on broken backs, ignoring Proverbs' warning, wealth gotten by vanity shall be diminished. Edmund inherited not just acres but this moral bankruptcy, his affair with Ruth a continuation of paternal patterns. Whispers in Charlottesville spoke of Thomas's own indiscretions, blue-eyed children scattered like seeds. Catherine, trapped in this web, embodied the jealous wife of Scripture, akin to Sarah casting out Hagar, yet without Abraham's intervention. Ruth's life was a testament to endurance, her faith a quiet flame. In the kitchen's heat, she hummed spirituals, "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot," infusing meals with love despite the bile served back. Her bond with Daniel was fierce, maternal protection like a lioness, teaching him survival's psalms, humility, vigilance, hope and redemption. "The Lord sees all," she'd whisper, her voice a balm against the world's cruelty. Garrett, the overseer, was evil incarnate, a man whose soul seemed sold, delighting in power's abuse. His whip cracked like thunder, each strike a desecration of "Love thy neighbor." Daniel's scars were his trophies, but in them, Daniel found strength, like Job's trials forging faith. As days lengthened, subtle shifts, Catherine's migraines, excuses to linger near the fields, Edmund's furtive glances at the quarters, Daniel's growing awareness of his anomaly, questions to Ruth met with tears. The air thickened with foreboding, sensory details amplifying dread, the metallic tang of impending rain, the crunch of gravel under boots like bones breaking, the distant howl of hounds echoing judgment. This was no mere domestic drama, it was a biblical parable unfolding in real time. Themes of guilt wove through Edmund's unspoken remorse, perhaps in solitary rides where he confessed to the wind. Sin's legacy haunted, divine retribution hovering like the mountain's shadow. Justice, psychological and spiritual, built suspense, would redemption come or ruin? In the quarter's twilight gatherings, elders spoke of signs, a blue-eyed child as omen, foretelling upheaval. Daniel, emblem of mixed blood, symbolized America's fracture, promise tainted by slavery's curse. Emotionally, viewers feel dread for Daniel's vulnerability, empathy for Ruth's suffering, curiosity about Catherine's breaking point, reflection on systemic evils. The narrative tightens, short breaths in description, pauses for narration's rhythm. Listen, feel the earth tremble. Cinematic visuals immerse, close-ups on eyes reflecting skies, wide shots of fields under storm clouds, sensory textures like rough bark, slick leaves. Historically rooted, 1851 Virginia, tobacco economy slumping post-Mexican War, social tensions pre-Civil War. Church attendance mandatory, yet hypocrisy rife. Slavery's brutalities documented, whippings, family separations, sexual exploitation common, unspoken. Spiritually chilling, undertones of haunting legacy, as if ghosts of ancestors watched, waiting for atonement. The sins of the fathers, Exodus intones, visiting upon children. Daniel's eyes? A divine mirror, forcing confrontation. As part 1 closes, suspense peaks, a single moment approaches, violent, irrevocable, where jealousy ignites murder. What shattered the silence? Hold that breath, the reckoning draws near. Beneath the relentless Virginia sun, where the air hung heavy with the earthy tang of melting snow and budding tobacco, the Hartwell Plantation stirred with the rhythms of renewal. But in the spring of 1851, renewal carried a double edge, like the serpent in Eden, promising life while coiling with deceit. The fields, once blanketed in winter's white shroud, now squelched underfoot, mud clinging to boots like sins to the soul. Fences sagged from the thaw's weight, tools rusted in barns, and the overseer's whip cracked sporadically, urging enslaved hands to mend what nature had broken. Yet amid this bustle, a deeper fracture widened, the chasm in Catherine Hartwell's heart, where jealousy festered like a biblical plague, threatening to consume all in its path. For jealousy is as cruel as the grave, Song of Solomon warned, and on this estate, grave it would prove. Daniel, the blue-eyed enigma, toiled in isolation, his broad shoulders flexing under the strain of hammer and nail. Reassigned to the stable, a cavernous structure of weathered timber and hay-scented gloom, he worked methodically, the rhythmic thud of his tools echoing like a heartbeat in the dim light. Straw crunched under his feet, mingling with the soft nickers of horses in their stalls, their warm breath fogging the air. Leather saddles gleamed faintly on racks, polished by stable hands, while shafts of sunlight pierced cracks in the walls, illuminating dust motes that danced like restless spirits. For 3 days, he labored alone, replacing rotted boards that splintered under his saw, their decay a metaphor for the rotting core of Hartwell's legacy. The wood's rough texture bit into his palms, drawing beads of blood that he wiped away without complaint, his mind a whirlwind of unspoken questions. Why the hatred? Why him? At 15, in the sweltering tobacco rows where leaves stuck to sweat. Slicked skin like accusations, old Joseph had pulled him aside. The elder slave, his back a map of whip scars like Christ's stripes, leaned on his hoe, voice a gravelly murmur beneath the overseer's distant gaze. The main house loomed on the veranda, Catherine's silhouette a watchful specter. Boy, them eyes of yours, they the master's own. Proof of blood mixed where it shouldn't. Daniel's stomach had knotted, the truth landing like a stone in still water, rippling outward. Father. The word tasted like ash, forbidden fruit from a tree he never planted. Joseph had glanced around, paranoia etched in his wrinkled brow, then resumed digging, leaving Daniel to grapple with the revelation alone. That night, under a moon that cast silvery judgment through the cabin's cracks, he confronted Ruth. Their meal, cornmeal mush congealed in wooden bowls, flecked with meager salt pork, sat untouched as he whispered, "Mama, is the master." Her face, lined with years of silent endurance, crumpled like parchment in flame. "Don't speak it, child. Some shadow swallow you whole. Survive, that's the Lord's command." Her eyes, dark pools of pain, held volumes unspoken, violation, resilience, a mother's fierce shield against the world's cruelty. Daniel had nodded, swallowing the ache, learning that truth was a luxury slaves couldn't afford. "The truth shall set you free," John proclaimed, but here, it chained tighter. Watching the Hartwell children from afar was a peculiar torment, a window into a parallel existence where blood meant privilege, not curse. Margaret, born a year after him in 1838, flitted through the gardens like a butterfly in silk, her laughter tinkling like crystal bells from the veranda. As a child, she'd tossed him crumbs of kindness, a wave, a curious question, before society's venom seeped in. By 13, she glided past him, gaze averted, treating him as one might a shadow, present but unseen. Ned, 11 and sharp as a thorn, embodied the family's darker inheritance. His stern features mirrored Edmund's, but twisted with Catherine's bile. From boyhood, he'd wielded petty power, hurling stones that bruised flesh, tattling infractions that earned lashes. "Lazy nigger," he'd sneer, echoing his mother's whispers, his cruelty a rehearsal for mastery. Sarah, 7 and innocent as Eve before the fall, still smiled at slaves with untainted warmth, her curls bouncing as she played. But Daniel knew the serpent lurked, society would coil around her heart soon enough, poisoning purity. Most piercing were glimpses of Edmund with his true heirs, moments stolen through windows fogged by breath, or from the yard's periphery. Edmund, though distant, poured affection like rare wine, rides with Ned across mist-shrouded fields, teaching the boy to grip reins in command land, gifts from Richmond unwrapped in the parlor's warm glow, dolls for the girls eliciting squeals, evenings by the hearth, his deep voice reading scriptures or tales, firelight dancing on their faces like divine favor. Daniel's chest would tighten, a storm of emotions brewing, longing for a father's nod, anger at denial, grief for the void where kinship should bloom. Edmund avoided him like a leper, eyes skimming past as if Daniel were a ghost haunting his conscience. Acknowledgement would crack the facade, expose the sin against Ruth, a violation of "thou shalt not commit adultery," etched in stone yet ignored in flesh. Better to pretend, Edmund seemed to decree, preserving the illusion of honor. But illusions, like idols, invite divine wrath. The winter prior had been a trial by ice, a biblical deluge of snow that blanketed the plantation in judgment's white robe. From late November, flakes fell relentlessly, drifts piling against cabin walls like barriers to the world. Roads vanished under frozen waves, isolating Hartwell like Sodom cut off. Fields slept dormant, work shifting to barns where tobacco cured in smoky haze, its acrid scent clinging to clothes like guilt. Cabins turned frigid tombs, drafts whistling through gaps like mournful spirits, enslaved families huddling by meager fires fed with scavenged wood. Rations dwindled, cornmeal thinned, meat scarce, testing faith as in the wilderness wanderings. Illness swept like a reaper, coughs echoing through nights, fevers burning unchecked. Old Bessie, her kindness a rare light in Daniel's youth, succumbed first, her body laid in frozen earth with hurried prayers. Thomas followed, 40 years of toil ending in a shallow grave, his passing a whisper amid the storm. Yet in this desolation bloomed fragile peace. Visitors barred, Catherine confined to the house's warmth, her venom contained. Edmund fretted over survival, stockpiling wood, rationing grain, his commands barked from horseback, breath clouding like smoke signals. Then Ruth fell. A cough at first, dry and insistent, escalating to wet rasps that shook her frame. She collapsed in the kitchen, pots clattering like thunder, steam rising around her like incense to indifferent gods. Daniel carried her home, her weight feather-light yet crushing, laying her on the pallet where drafts gnawed like wolves. Nights blurred, he sponged her brow with rags dipped in snowmelt, forced broth past cracked lips, listened to her wheezes like a death rattle. No doctor came, roads impassable, slaves mere assets, not souls. Edmund sent tonic from his stores, bitter elixir Daniel administered with trembling hands, praying to a God who seemed distant as the mountains. "Heal me, O Lord," Jeremiah pleaded, and Ruth lingered on the edge, her fragility a mirror to Daniel's soul. In those vigil hours, truth crystallized, she was his anchor, his only kin in chains. Loss would unmoor him, adrift in hatred's sea. She rallied, frail but alive, resuming duties with slowed steps, a ghost of her vigor. Daniel's protectiveness sharpened, a shield against Catherine's gaze, but shields bend under divine tests. March thawed the land but not the hearts. Warmth unnatural, like false prophets' promises, melted snow into quagmires that sucked at wheels and feet. Seedlings sprouted in beds, green harbingers of harvest, while preparations hummed, fences mended with splintering posts, plows sharpened on whetstones sparking in the sun. Edmund departed for Richmond, horse clopping down the muddy drive, leaving instructions crisp as autumn leaves. Catherine assumed command, capable yet simmering. Whispers among house slaves painted her unraveling, pacing footsteps creaking floors at midnight, muffled sobs behind locked doors, rages over spilled tea or crooked linens. Something gnawed her spirit, guilt's worm, perhaps, or jealousy amplified by solitude. The heart is deceitful above all things, Jeremiah intoned, and hers deceived most. On the third day, she summoned Garrett to the study. An hour passed, voices murmuring through oak doors like conspirators. He emerged smirking, a devil's grin that chilled spines. Next dawn, reassignment, Daniel to stable repairs. Others skilled in woodwork idled, but obedience was survival. He arrived at the stable's threshold, tools in hand, the scent of manure and hay enveloping like a shroud. For days, he toiled, sawing planks that bit back with splinters, hammering nails that echoed judgments, horses observing with liquid eyes unburdened by human sin. Then Catherine appeared, silhouette framed in sunlight like an avenging angel. Daniel froze, hammer mid-swing, sweat tracing rivulets down his back. "Stop." Her voice sliced the air, cold as winter's return. He obeyed, eyes downcast on straw-strewn floor. "Look at me." Trap sprung, defiance or obedience, both perilous. He lifted his gaze, blue meeting hazel in electric clash. She trembled, green dress rustling like leaves in storm, perfume cloying amid stable musk. "Do you know what you are? An abomination. Proof of sin, your mother's seduction, my husband's weakness." Lies, yet she clung to them, blame shifted from Edmund's lust. "You mock us with those eyes, Hartwell eyes on bastard flesh." Grief cracked her facade, voice fracturing like glass. 15 years I've endured, but no more." She fled, leaving echoes of despair. Daniel should have sensed the storm's crest, but endurance was his creed. Wrongly. Edmund returned triumphant, gifts unwrapped in laughter's glow, dolls for girls, a knife for Ned. Dinner's candlelight flickered on silver, aromas of roast chicken and peach pie wafting. From quarters, it seemed idyllic. But dawn brought reckoning. Catherine stormed the study, doors slamming like thunderclaps. Voices rose, her accusations piercing, his defenses rumbling. Slaves eavesdropped in dread, fury's cadence, no words clear, but intent venomous. She emerged ashen, eyes rimmed red, he followed, grim as a judge. Afternoon summoned Daniel to the study, leather-bound tomes glaring from shelves, pipe smoke lingering like incense. Edmund stared out window, back rigid. "Your mother's sold. Traitor next week. Blow like whip's kiss, air fleeing lungs. Please, sir." Desperation broke protocol. Decided. "Lie bare Ruth vital, this vengeance pure." Edmund turned, blue eyes meeting blue in silent accusation, a father's denial etched in stone. Before plunging into the cataclysm that followed, if these echoes of history's dark corridors, where sin and justice collide, resonate in your soul, subscribe and ring the bell. Drop your locale in comments, let's map our shared journey through time's shadows. Deeper layers unfolded, spiritual symbolism in eyes as mirrors of soul, biblical parallels to Hagar's exile, psychological torment twisting Catherine into a Jezebel figure. Guilt-haunted Edmund, midnight confessions perhaps to a God he half believed. Ruth's resilience embodied Proverbs' virtuous woman, her silence a prayer. Daniel's revelation at 15 marked a coming-of-age, job-like trials forging inner steel. Winter's isolation mirrored spiritual wilderness, illness a test of faith. Ruth's near-death amplified maternal bond, echoing Mary's sorrow at the cross. Reassignment to stable, a Judas betrayal, solitude breeding confrontation. Catherine's breakdown, raw, cinematic, trembling hands, wild eyes, voice crescendoing like opera's climax. Sensory immersion, perfume clashing with hay, sunlight haloing her fury, Daniel's pounding heart. Edmund's return, contrast of warmth masking rot, dinner's opulence versus quarters scraps. Arguments auditory buildup, tension palpable. Summons, studies oppressive atmosphere, revelations gut punch, plea breaking chains momentarily. Themes, divine justice looming, redemption elusive, legacies haunting curse. Narrative paces naturally, short sentences for tension, stop P pauses implied, flow rhythmic for narration. Expanded historically, 1851 economic pressures, slavery's family separations documented, winter hardships real in records. Emotionally, dread in reassignment, empathy for Ruth, curiosity at confrontation, reflection on systemic sin. Spiritually chilling, undertones of inevitable retribution, as if ancestors' ghosts stirred, demanding balance. In the oppressive hush of Edmund Hartwell's study, where the air hung thick with the scents of aged leather bindings and lingering pipe tobacco, a confrontation unfolded that would echo through the corridors of eternity. The room's walls, lined with shelves groaning under the weight of forgotten tomes, yellowed pages whispering of laws and lineages, seemed to close in like witnesses to judgment. Sunlight slanted through heavy drapes, casting elongated shadows that danced across the polished oak desk, cluttered with ink-stained ledgers and quills like feathers from fallen angels. Daniel stood there, his calloused hands clenched at his sides, the rough homespun of his shirt scratching against skin marked by years of toil. His blue eyes, those damning mirrors of heritage, locked onto Edmund's for a fleeting instant, a gaze that bridged the unbridgeable, father to unacknowledged son, master to slave. Edmund's face, weathered by battles and burdens, flickered with something raw, a shadow of guilt, perhaps, like Cain's after the first murder, or the weariness of Solomon realizing all is vanity. But it vanished, replaced by the iron mask of authority, the kind forged in the fires of ownership where human souls were tallied like livestock. "That's enough," he intoned, his voice a low rumble echoing off the walls, carrying the weight of commandments unbroken. "You're dismissed." Daniel turned, his footsteps muffled on the threadbare rug, mind a tempest of despair. Sold Ruth, his anchor, his only kin, ripped away like the Israelites from their homeland. The word reverberated in his skull, a curse from Pharaoh's lips. He stumbled into the yard, where the late afternoon sun baked the red clay earth, steam rising from recent rains like the breath of buried secrets. He found Ruth in the laundry shed, a dim alcove behind the main house where steam billowed from massive tubs like fog from Gehenna. Her hands, gnarled and raw from endless scrubbing, plunged into scalding water. Wringing linens with a rhythm born of resignation. Soap's acrid bite mingled with the metallic tang of well water, and the slosh of fabrics echoed her labored breaths. When Daniel whispered the verdict, her face remained stoic, etched lines deepening like carvings in stone. No tears, only a nod, as if she'd foreseen this plague in dreams. "Be careful, child," she murmured, gripping his hands with fingers slick and strong, her touch a lifeline in the storm. "More than ever. She thirsts for your pain, has since your first cry." "This sail?" "Merely the serpent's first strike. Don't resist. Endure. Promise me you'll endure." Her eyes, dark pools reflecting untold sufferings, held a biblical plea like Rachel weeping for her children, refusing comfort. Daniel vowed it, words tasting of ash, but the oath felt fragile as papyrus in flame. Careful? The hourglass had already shattered. The trader arrived under a leaden sky, his wagon creaking like the gates of Hades, chains clanking in the bed, a symphony of bondage. Silas Cobb, a specter in his 50s with a face carved by wind and wickedness, ice cold as coins appraising flesh. He dismounted with a grunt, boots sinking into mud that clutched like accusing hands. Edmund met him in the yard, transaction unfolding with clinical precision, haggling over Ruth's worth like Judas over silver. "Past prime, but sturdy, $400?" Cobb countered with $375, cash exchanged in a leather pouch that thudded dully. 10 minutes granted for farewells. Ruth gathered her meager relics, a faded dress folded with care, a blanket threadbare from nights of prayer, a wooden box cradling treasures, a button from her mother's gown, evoking generational chains, a smooth stone from Daniel's childish hand, symbol of innocence lost, a ribbon scrap, faded red like blood atonement. Daniel watched from the yard's edge, heart pounding like a war drum, as Ruth ascended the wagon. Her best dress, Sunday finery for slave sermons under stars, hung straight on her frame. Composed, spine unbent, like Esther before the king, she averted her gaze. Mercy, he realized later, a look might have unleashed his fury, a futile rebellion against Goliath. The wagon lurched forward, wheels churning mud into ruts, vanishing down the oak-lined drive. Daniel stood petrified, then retrieved his hoe, blade biting earth in mechanical fury. Inside, something fractured, a soul's keystone crumbling, echoing the temple veil torn asunder. In the quarters that night, under a canopy of stars indifferent as ancient gods, Daniel sat alone. The cabin's dirt floor chilled his bones, emptiness amplifying every creak like ghosts lamenting. Ruth's absence was a void, her presence once a warm hearth against winter's bite. Gone south to Georgia's cotton hells, where fields stretch like endless trials, slaves broken under sun's lash. He pondered flight northward to promised lands, following underground stars like magi. But hounds and patrols loomed, punishment biblical, whipping to stripes like Paul's, branding irons searing flesh, death's noose swinging. Confront Catherine? Her triumph would be sweet poison. So, survival, days blurred into numb toil, rising and falling like penance prayers. Yet Catherine's venom unsatisfied, Daniel's eyes, blue beacons of betrayal, haunted her like Abel's blood crying from ground. Freedom from reminder demanded eradication, a final solution echoing Herod's slaughter. 2 weeks post-sale, late April's warmth cloaked growing dread. Edmund rode to Charlottesville, horses' hooves fading into dusk, business with bankers, loans like yokes, investments gambling souls. Catherine paced the house, skirts whispering over floors like serpents slithering. Rooms felt tomb-like, parlors velvet chairs gathering dust, dining hall's chandelier tinkling ominously. House slaves skirted her path, sensing storms brew, her rages like thunderclaps over trifles. As twilight bled purple across skies, summons came, Daniel to mend a guest room window. Tools. In hand, hammer's weight familiar, nails sharp as thorns, he approached the back door, face a mask. Catherine greeted him, eyes glittering feverishly, leading upstairs. The room, sparse, beds linens crisp and untouched, dresser scarred by time. Window shattered by storm branch, glass shards glinting like broken covenants. Daniel measured, wood's grain rough under fingers, ignoring her shadow in doorway. Silence pressed, heavy as judgment. Your mother's in Georgia now, she shattered it, voice silky venom. Cotton plantation near Savannah. They grind slaves to dust 12, 14 hours bent low, back screaming, hands shredded by bulls. Daniel froze, tools clattering softly. Visions assaulted, Ruth under merciless sun, fields white as harvest ready for reaping souls. Why, he rasped, turning, first words to her, defiance like David's sling. Her face twisted, Medusa-like. How dare you, with those eyes, his eyes. Pistol emerged from pocket folds, a dainty derringer, pearl handle mocking lethality. Disappear you will accident on roof, runaway lost. Slaves vanish, none mourn. Barrel trembled at his chest, finger whitening on trigger. Mistake erased. Snap, like Peter's denial reversed. Daniel lunged, hands grasping steel. Struggle erupted, bodies crashing wall, plaster crumbling like manna. She clawed, nails raking cheek, blood-warm trickle. Wrist twisted, they spun in dresser toppling, contents scattering like temple merchants' coins. Bang gunshot deafening, powder's acrid cloud choking. Stillness. Catherine staggered, hand clutching blooming crimson on bodice, fabric soaking like sacrificial robes. Eyes widened disbelief, perhaps regret like Judas beholding betrayal's fruit. You. Gurgled, blood bubbling lips. Thud, body collapsing, limbs splaying unnaturally. Daniel stood, pistol heavy in palm, world tilting. Self-defense, yet irrelevant, slave-slaying white woman invoked mob justice, nooses embrace. Run? Hunted like Jonah fleeing. Confess? Laughter from courts. Paralyzed, footsteps ascended Edmund early. Doorway framed him, scene seared wife's corpse, blood pooling viscous, Daniel armed, chaos. Blue eyes met blue, unspoken paternity hanging like incense. She aimed to kill, Daniel stammered. Struggle accidental. Stop. Edmund knelt, fingers to neck, pulse absent. Closed her eyes tenderly, hand lingering like farewell caress. Rising, mask inscrutable. Quarters. Speak not. I'll handle. Daniel obeyed, pistol placed gingerly, descending stairs in trance. Expected irons, but silence. Edmund summoned doctor, sheriff. Tailspun, Catherine's melancholy, dark moods like Elijah's despair. Self-inflicted in solitude. Wound matched, gun positioned. Sheriff Wilkins, war comrade, nodded, suicide shameful but plausible. Loss profound, hand on shoulder. Dr. Harrison concurred, mind's affliction, beyond cure. Arrangements, body prepared, children informed, staying neighbors, spared immediate horror. Funeral 3 days, family plot on hill, iron fence guarding like Eden's gate. County assembled under somber skies, minister eulogizing life's brevity, God's enigma, peace eternal. Edmund stoic, children grieving, Margaret's tears silent rivers, Ned's jaw clenched, Sarah's confusion childlike. Condolences flowed, story unquestioned. Daniel breathed, fields reclaiming him. Mourning draped estate, black crape fluttering like raven's wings, family in ebony garb. Numb, he toiled, whispers in quarters sensing truth but unspoken. Ruth's ghost ached, cabin hollow, wonders of her fate tormenting like Job's questions. 2 months, tobacco greened, routines resumed. New housekeeper arrived, widow's efficiency masking voids. Then July, Daniel sold quietly to William Preston, Allegheny Farm. $600, strong hands value. No words from Edmund, but understanding, presence intolerable, reminder of blood spilled. Before unveiling the legacy's final twists, if these sagas of shadowed justice and redemptive whispers captivate, subscribe, bell for notifications. Comment your origins, connect our histories. Deeper, spiritual threads, guilt as original sin's echo, struggle mirroring Jacob's wrestle. Psychological, Catherine's madness, jealousy devouring like fire. Edmund's cover-up, mercy or self-preservation? Biblical, vengeance mine, yet human hands intervene. Cinematic, steam visuals in laundry, gunshots sensory blast, smoke sting, blood's metallic scent. Pacing, short bursts for tension, pauses rhythmic. Historically, 1851 slave sales routine, suicides hushed in elite families, self-defense irrelevant for enslaved. Emotionally, dread in summons, empathy for Ruth's parting, curiosity at cover-up, reflection on injustice's haunt. Chilling, divine irony, sin's fruit spared, but legacy cursed. Tease, what became of Daniel's path? The wagon creaked northward under a merciless July sun, wheels carving fresh ruts into the red Virginia clay that had once defined Daniel's every breath. Summer 1851, tobacco leaves hung heavy in the fields, their sticky scent mingling with dust kicked up by the horses' hooves, a farewell perfume from a world he was leaving behind. William Preston, the new owner, sat silent beside him, 50s, weathered face etched by sun and silence, a man of few words who asked nothing of origins. Daniel clutched a small bundle, a worn shirt, a corncob pipe, the smooth stone he'd once given Ruth as a child, his only relics of a life before the blue-eyed curse. As the plantation receded, Daniel turned once. The white columns of the main house gleamed like false promises against the Blue Ridge horizon, fields stretched endless, quarters huddled low like wounded animals, oaks lined the drive, shadows lengthening like accusations. Edmund stood nowhere in sight, perhaps in his study, ledger open, conscience sealed. No farewell, no glance. Father and son parted without acknowledgement, the secret between them heavier than iron. Daniel never saw him again. The wagon rolled on, carrying him toward western Virginia's Allegheny foothills, a new chapter scripted in exile. Preston's farm sprawled modest, barely 100 acres, no grand columns, no overseer's whip cracking like thunder. Corn and wheat rippled golden under summer winds, vegetable patches bloomed with practical abundance, livestock lowed in fenced pastures. For enslaved souls labored here, including Daniel, fewer than Hartwell's 43, intimacy replacing the vast machinery of empire. Preston worked alongside them, sleeves rolled, hands calloused from plow and axe. Not cruel, not kind, just pragmatic, a man coaxing life from stubborn soil. Daniel welcomed the variety, plowing behind slow oxen whose breath steamed in dawn chill, harvesting wheat that scratched skin and filled lungs with chaff, mending fences where nails rang. Like small prayers against wood. Exhaustion became mercy, muscles aching, mind too weary for memories. The others watched him curiously, a newcomer with eyes like winter sky, silent as stone. They asked little, he offered less. Years blurred into seasons, Daniel grew older, stronger, quieter. Skills accumulated like quiet victories, oxen handling, wheat scything, equipment repair under lantern light. Nights brought ghosts, Ruth's face in Georgia cotton fields, back bent under sun that scorched without mercy, Catherine's final gurgle, blood blooming on silk, Edmund's averted gaze, mercy cloaked in denial. He pondered what might have been acknowledgement, family, a name without shame, but such thoughts bred madness. Better to endure, as Ruth had taught. Then April 1861 shattered the fragile routine. Virginia seceded, cannons roared at Sumter, war's fever swept the South. Preston enlisted in Confederate gray, leaving wife and slaves to tend the farm. Supplies dwindled, rations thinned, tools broke without replacement, fields suffered from absent hands. By 1863, Union forces pushed into western Virginia. The land became contested ground. Armies marched through like locusts, requisitioning grain, burning barns, trampling crops. Chaos cracked old chains, patrols thinned, overseers fled, uncertainty bred opportunity. August 1863, moonless night, Daniel slipped from the cabin, past darkened farmhouse, down the road toward Union campfires flickering like distant hope. Heart hammered, expecting shots, recapture, news. But war had unraveled order, no one stopped him. He reached the pickets, voice steady, "I want to join." Skeptical eyes scanned the 35-year-old, too old for fresh recruits, yet desperation ruled. Enlisted in the 5th United States Colored Infantry, Black Regiment, Ohio-born but Virginia-bound. The recruiting officer noted the anomaly, blue eyes, unusual. A detail etched in muster rolls, a thread preserving his trace. 2 years of war forged him anew. Marched through Virginia's scarred landscapes, North Carolina's coastal lowlands, Richmond, Petersburg siege trenches thick with mud and death, Fort Fisher's sand stained red in failed then victorious assaults, Wilmington's capture, Sugarloaf Hill's brutal push. Battles unnamed in his memory but etched in soul, comrades falling, screams swallowed by cannon thunder, the metallic tang of blood and powder. He saw slavery's empire crumbled, plantations ablaze, chains broken, freed people streaming toward Union lines like Exodus. In April 1865, war ended, Daniel lived, scarred but breathing. Freedom dawned precarious, no home, no kin, resources scant. He drifted north, odd jobs in barns, nights in abandoned sheds, hunger a constant companion. Eventually Pennsylvania, communities of formerly enslaved forging lives from ashes. Outside Pittsburgh, a small town welcomed him. Carpenter work suited, hands skilled from plantation repairs, reliability his only recommendation. He chose a surname, Harris, plain, unburdened, a fresh slate. Daniel Harris. No wife, no children, solitude his shield. He spoke little of the past, shared no tales of blue eyes or bloodied bedrooms. Secrets stayed buried, heavy as lead. Late nights, however, memories surfaced like submerged roots. Ruth, had she survived Georgia's brutal fields? Cotton's relentless stoop, overseers' whips, heat that killed. He hoped she sought emancipation, found peace. He never searched, some truths too painful to unearth. In 1870, census taker knocked. Daniel answered, age 42, born Virginia, carpenter, colored. In the distinguishing characteristics, blue eyes, unusual. A notation overlooked by most, yet preserved thread in history's weave. He lived another 23 years, quiet labor, steady faith. Pneumonia claimed him in 1893, age 65. Buried in modest cemetery outside Pittsburgh, simple stone, Daniel Harris 1828 to 1893. Minister and undertaker alone attended. Secrets went with him to the grave. Back in Virginia, Hartwell Plantation crumbled. War ravaged it, Union occupation 1864, fields trampled, barns torched, livestock seized. Edmund died 1867, 2 years post-surrender. Obituary in Charlottesville paper, veteran, honorable planter, community pillar. No mention of Catherine's suicide, Daniel's shadow, Ruth's sale, 43 enslaved lives. Ned tried reviving the estate, debts crushed, economy ruined, labor system shattered. Sold 1872 to creditors, land parceled. Main house stood vacant, decaying. Torn down 1889, materials salvaged. Today, roadside historical marker notes prominent family, active late 1700s to post-Civil War. No Catherine, no Daniel, no enslaved voices. Quarters plowed under, family cemetery overgrown, headstones weathered. Catherine's, beloved wife and mother, 1814 to 1851. Edmunds, a man of honor, 1804 to 1867. Irony lost on passers-by. Yet records endure in Albemarle Courthouse, dusty boxes. Ruth sold March 1851 to Silas Cobb, $375. Catherine's death April, suicide. Daniel sold July to Preston, $600. Timing suspicious. Healthy kitchen slave sold. Wife dead weeks later. Valuable field hand gone months after. Patterns emerge for those who search. Historians note transactions but miss connections, jealousy, murder, cover-up. Enslaved testimony never recorded, voices silenced. What truths linger? Edmund, respectable by era's measure, planter, veteran, churchgoer, yet owned humans, fathered child in violation, covered murder to preserve reputation. Catherine, trapped in system denying autonomy, rage turned on powerless. Daniel, survivor, self-defense denied by law, spared by father's silent mercy, closest to justice possible then. This tale echoes across South, forbidden unions, jealous wives' torment, families torn by sales, violence beneath civility. Most lost to time. Daniel's survived by fragments, blue eyes and census, muster rolls, sale dates. Eyes, curse marking difference, near death, gift etching memory. History demands we confront, no pure heroes/villains, only people constrained by time's evils. Suffering immense, yet resilience profound. Secrets in records await piecing, questions eternal. Daniel survived slavery's end, glimpsed freedom. Ruth likely perished before. Their stories, fragmentary, uncertain, remind, enslaved existed, loved, endured. Their traces deserve telling. In 1920, researcher found 1870 entry, Daniel Harris, carpenter, blue eyes noted. Curiosity sparked, but trail ended. She never connected to Hartwell. Eyes remained mystery. Yet those eyes proved everything, sin's evidence, humanity's proof. In end, perhaps that's legacy, to leave trace we were here, mattered. This story, pieced from fragments, reveals past's complexity, cruelty, survival, hidden truths. Did it unfold exactly? Records suggest similar dramas across Virginia. Names changed, details vary, but essence real, jealousy, murder, slavery's brutalities. What say you? Secrets still buried? Share below. If dark histories grip you, subscribe, bell on, more untold shadows await. Until next time.